Welcome, everyone. This is Authors Bantering, and this week we're going to be talking about writer's block and hopefully how to overcome it. Um, it's a difficult topic because there's so many different forms of it, and I know I'll speak for myself first, where I generally don't get writer's block in terms of ideas. For me, it's never really an issue when it comes to trying to come up with like how the story should go. It's always a matter of writer's block of how I can tell the story. It's always a craft thing. If I ever get stuck, it's for me is generally because I'm not quite sure how to do the scene. Like how do I actually write the scene? How do I show it? What's the actual technique? It's never so much an idea of I don't know how to finish the story. I don't know about you, Ian, but that's at least how my
No,
perspective's on it.
that's certainly my most common form of writer's block. It's the idea that I'll be stuck on, where should the scene take place, or how to open the scene, or which
Yes.
character should be in the scene, or what exactly are they talking about here, or even, what kind of scene is needed to move the story forward. I'll get things like that. And I think for me, I sort of developed this power through method where, I'm a big believer in shitty rough drafts. Like just get something out on the page, like just do it, like get a super rough version. Even if you end up deleting 100% of it later, or, deleting 98% of it, it's still a way to keep moving forward, but then also, get a little bit closer to what that scene might look like.
Excellent.
And, for me, like seeing a scene that isn't working is much more effective than looking at the blank page and trying to create something from nothing. So even if I write a scene that turns out to be garbage trash, I'll be able to go back and revise it and get closer to the scene that works. And so for me, writer's block and dealing with it is just kind of about charging through and getting something done.
Okay, so you are the opposite of me, which is awesome. This will be a good conversation here, because I'm kind of the opposite. So when I get stuck in that same situation there, it's often not even in the first draft. It's usually like in the later ones. So like it'll usually be like second or third draft where I recognize, right, the scene's not working, right? This chapter's not working. I need to figure out what's wrong with it, what's going on. And for me, a lot of that actually requires stepping away. Not from the project itself, basically, but just taking a step back from that particular one, like letting it set for a few days, and actually going back through and looking at and either reading books that are similar in theme and idea to what I'm writing, or even watching movies, and just seeing like, okay, so if I'm stuck on like I need to write a party scene, right? Like there's a party scene, and I've got to show these different characters interacting. And I've got to really show these different characterizations. I'll have in my head what I need people to see, and then to actually rewrite the scene out, basically, right? I'll go through and I'll start reading like Anna Karenina, right? And reread the ball scene in that, right? I'll go through other books that I've read before and see, okay, how did this author do it, right? Like, so these authors here are describing these same scenes. How are they doing it? Oh, okay, this is very descriptive. You're describing everybody, describing, this sort of 19th century style of these very like extravagant scenes that you're trying to paint for everybody. Okay, now let's look at this other author here, right? How do they do it? Like how does Bret Easton Ellis in American Psycho, right? How does he write it? How does he write a nightclub scene, right? Well, it's very matter of fact. It's very pointed. The character in that scene, obviously, the Patrick Bateman there is very, very focused on just the materialism. So every single designer outfit is mentioned. Every single drink is mentioned. Very superficial, right? And so going through and seeing that and seeing how different authors use their techniques, it gives me sort of ideas of how I can do mine. Like, okay, so this character, my character is very all right, they're very introverted, they're very shy, right? Okay, so they're going to view the perspective in a much different way. Okay, so let's write this out and let's start including some elements of that, right, of their introvertedness into the scene that I'm crafting. But that's kind of how it works for me. It's that time away, and it's doing a lot of the reading and a lot of the kind of replenishing the well, basically, rather than just exhausting it all.
I think that you're getting at a really core part of the reason why people have writer's block, and that they're not sure how to do something. They're not sure
Yes.
how to solve a problem or accomplish a task. And I think looking to other writers, looking to models, even just ways of using language or ways of setting up scenes, I think can be a tremendously effective way of getting our own minds going in that sense. And I certainly do this myself. Often when I'm drafting, not so much when I'm editing, but when I'm drafting, I will often begin the writing session literally every single time by picking out a book that I know well, usually one that's relevant to the what I'm working on that day, but not necessarily. and just reread a section, sometimes a random page or a chapter I like, or, just a random point. But something to get my mind flowing, get, absorbing those words, thinking about those words. It has to be a book that I've read at least once before,
Yep.
because then I'm not worried about plot, or certainly spoilers, but I can really focus on craft and technique. And again, this is a first thing in the morning before the writing session kind of tactic that I'll use. And again, just to kind of get my mind warmed up to the concept of writing.
Nice. I like that. That's yeah. That's an excellent way of doing it right there. Is that type of attitude of just going through basically and going back through works that you've known before, which was a good distinction there. Um,
As far as ideas go, though, I want to talk a little bit about that. When you're having writer's block for ideas,
yep.
like a core idea, I think that's a very different kind of writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
I think that writers who are suffering from that, maybe a couple things could be going on. One, maybe you're getting ideas, but you're not really recording them in the
Yep.
right way. Maybe you're getting ideas in the middle of the night, and then by the time you wake up, they're gone. So something
Yeah.
like that, you might want to keep a notebook next to your bed. I try to keep a notebook with me anyway and try to jot things down.
Hmm.
Especially sometimes ways of fixing a problem within a piece I'm working on, but then sometimes something completely different. And sometimes, I'll write something down and then look at it 3 weeks later and realize, wow, this is garbage, and then throw it away. But
Yep.
sometimes I don't. And sometimes those are really good ideas that I want to save onto and use later, because I tend to have difficulty coming up with ideas. So the ideas that I do come up with are very precious. But if you find yourself not coming up with ideas at all, maybe it's a sign of a bigger problem. Maybe, you're stressed in some areas of your life and you can't focus on writing. Maybe you're losing interest in the writing itself. And it's not something that you really want to be focusing on anymore. We did a video a couple of weeks ago about looking in the mirror and asking yourself, is this really what I want to do? So that could be a problem as well. I mean, do you find this happening, like if you're at a point where you're not able to get ideas?
Generally, no. So very luckily, no. My mind is like a bunch of different like ideas all trying to cram to a subway. Like I've constantly got like new ideas. So if you're talking about like ideas in terms of like story, like overall story concepts, I think that the best way to handle that is to take time away and to reread what you enjoy. Like what are the books that made you want to be a writer? Like I can think right now, like on my shelf over there, I keep a whole like list of books that like I read everything from when I was young all the way through like my college age that at some point inspired me. They're books now that even some that I'm kind of like embarrassed that I liked in a way. Like I'm like, they're not bad at all basically, but they inspired me, right? So having a collection of works that you really enjoyed that really inspired you initially, reading back through those, I think will help give you the idea, will help bring that
Yeah.
back into what you enjoyed. But
That's a good point, actually, because I just
yeah,
talked about rereading books for like craft or stylistic or to ways of setting up a scene, or like you talked about with Anna Karenina, American Psycho. But I think that reason is just as equally valid, because you're rereading books literally to get ideas, like things, just ideas from scratch that
mhm,
might work for you. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate reason to
it
read.
is. But I also think though, if you're talking about ideas in terms of like plot, like in other words, like you plot this story out, like this generally will happen if you pant stories. If you're kind of like a Stephen King writer, basically, where like you just wake up and you start writing your stories without any kind of like end point in mind, then you're gonna get writer's block a lot. But it's writer's block of plot, right? You just don't know where the story's gonna go going forward. Which I used to be like that. It was very exciting. But yeah, that's basically can be solved by either plotting, or if you are gonna write in that style where you're just gonna pants, that writer's block I think will be cured just again kind of by time away. I think if you gave yourself a few days of just not writing and just actually thinking over, okay, where's the story gonna go next? Where do I need this to go? Okay, this is all right. This I got the character trapped here in this scenario, and there's no way out. And all right, well, how can I get them out? Right? And
Well, no,
sometimes you get bad ideas, but
I want to latch on to one thing, really
yeah,
important part of what you said is the idea that you're taking time away, like you're literally stepping away from the story, sometimes for just a day, but sometimes for multiple days, multiple weeks, maybe even longer, giving your unconscious mind time and space to, well, you're not even thinking about it all, to solve the problem. And I
absolutely.
think that when we're not, stressed and staring at the blank screen and, concentrating on something and worrying, our minds are able to do wonderful things when we're taking a shower or driving somewhere, or, right before you go to bed at night. I tend to get a lot of ideas then. And yeah, it's more creative space and more productive creative space than just staring at the blank screen in frustration.
It is. And again, I'm the person that tells you, to write every single day and don't take a day off, right? But like again, this is the problem with being a bit dogmatic about certain ideas, is that you have to recognize there are times when it's smarter to break them. In this case, if you are having a writer's block, either of just general ideas for stories or just plot ideas, you can't necessarily write your way through those. Those aren't something where you're just gonna sit on the computer and type away through it. I think it does take a little bit of kind of maturity to step away from the keyboard and know that you're going to be coming back to it, that you're not putting it aside, and actually take a day or two and go, okay, so how would I actually get through this, right? And I feel like 70% of the time, at least, basically stepping away usually gives you the answer. Like anytime I've ever had a problem, I've gone for a walk or gone to the gym or something like that, and I've come back like, later in the day. Usually I already have like some sort of idea in my head of how I want to move forward, but it happens. And don't mistake, I would not mistake a bad day for a complete block. Like there's a lot of days I go to the keyboard.
That's a really important distinction. I think that's a really important.
Yeah, because you're gonna blow it. Your mind will blow up every problem and to be much bigger than it is, and that's a huge one, right? Because going to the keyboard and not knowing what to write that day, and not having a good productive day, and not figuring out, like going like, oh, I don't know where I'm gonna head. I don't know where this is going, right? We all have those days. Those aren't blocks. Those are just bad days, and you go back the next day or two, and you'll be fine. So
I would actually even argue, so that exact mindset that you described, sitting down at the keyboard without knowing what to write. I realized this in my own process a long time ago. I wrote a blog post about it, but I will try to plan ahead what I'm going to write the day before, or over the weekend or something like that. And be kind of in the back of my mind thinking like, okay, I ended this scene here, but now what happens next? How should I go about that? What could happen in this scene? And in the back of my mind, I'll be kind of thinking about it when I'm actively drafting. And so even though I'm doing other things throughout the day, for example, if I'm writing 4 days a week, I finish a Tuesday session in the morning, 11 o'clock. After 11, in the afternoon, in the evening, before I go to bed, I'll be kind of mulling over, okay, where next? Where am I going to go next? Because it is so unproductive and painful for me to sit down at the keyboard without knowing where things are going to go.
Nope, I completely agree. And that's a challenge, right? That's kind of the hard part of this process is, going into that and needing to at least think ahead a little bit. But again, but if you are pantsing, right? Like I assume you don't have that problem because you outline, you sort of know what you have to work on, even if it's a first draft. Pantsers don't, right? Someone that just goes to the keyboard and starts writing doesn't know that, and that's gonna be the downside. The downside is you're not gonna always have clear direction if you don't outline.
I think the pants method is much more the seat of your pants method is the much more susceptible to writer's block than outlining and planning. Bingo. I think that even if you don't know what's going to happen in every scene as part of your plan or your outline, you still got the basics. And for me, knowing those basics can often help me push through the scene, or get the basics of a scene, or even get one key part of a scene, even if the rest is garbage.
Excellent. Nope, I completely agree with you. And so I think we covered, I guess, like the 3 areas of writer's block, if those exist at all.
I think, I mean, again, if you're listening to this and you're suffering from writer's block, I mean, you might start by thinking about why that writer's block is happening. And then once you've kind of figured that out, maybe try some of the remedies or some of the ideas that we've talked about in this video.
Yep, that makes sense. Hopefully it works. Again, it's a bit personal. Writer's block can be a bit personal, so it's difficult. And again, it depends upon the style of writing that you're doing. Again, outliners are going to have different ones than pantsers, right? And the degree to which you have it is often going to be different. But if we can summarize it in 3 different categories like we did, and I feel like that's pretty good. And so with that, we'll wrap it up here. We'll be back next week. If you've enjoyed the video, please give us a thumbs up. And with that, I'm signing off. This is Josh Bresslin. That's Ian M. Rogers.
Take it easy.